All right, so hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's live chat on depression. Obviously, you guys know that I'm Dr. J, naturopathic doctor and creator of Peace of Mind Method, and I'm going to be hosting this chat alone tonight so that we can have a little heart to heart. As I mentioned in my email that I sent to you guys the other day, this topic has always been a little bit touchy because it's one that makes me feel the most vulnerable, which is why I've put off doing a live on it for like years now. I think it's been 3 or 4 years in total that I've wanted to do this and I haven't. Not only is it personal, but it's one of those things that I feel it isn't universal. Like the symptoms of depression are so unique to each person, and we can feel very misunderstood in that, right? So I do tend to talk about it a lot less online, and I also don't want to be censored, and I know how the social media world works. But I know that everyone is here tonight, so I know that you guys are here because you guys have depression and that you're going to understand me is what I'm trying to get out. So I'm just going to give it to myself. I'm going to give it to you, Bear. I'm going to let myself give it to you, Bear. Okay. And I'm going to give you a good look into what role depression has played in my life so far and how I've learned to manage it, shift it, and then heal it to the best of my ability. Now, I always put that word in quotations when I use it because healing's a relative word. It's definitely not a destination word, it's a process word. And if I'm being really real with you guys, I think that we'll always be working on this sort of thing without the expectation that it's going to go away. So I've spent years being depressed as a kid. I was depressed as a teen, and then I was depressed as an adult. And I don't have all the fluffy rainbow sunshine answers about how to remove it from your life. But what I have been able to do is learn how to live with it in such an effective way that it doesn't have to take over me like it used to. Thanks, Leslie, for that comment in the chat right now. Yes, I am going to be brave tonight, and I know my words got twisted before because I do get nervous about this topic, but I know that you guys are here to support me, so we're gonna get through it together. But yeah, I'm gonna lay myself bare for you. As I say to my patients in Peace of Mind Method, I'm gonna put myself like a skewer on the barbecue so that you guys can have the very real and raw experience of this. I am someone who's huge on being authentic and delivering real information so that you guys can feel a lot less lonely on your mental health journey. So that is what I am here tonight to do. If I get jumbled up in my brain, I'll just take a step back, take a deep breath. You guys can all watch me do it live, and it can be, again, that real, raw, authentic experience of what it's like to watch me talk about this sort of thing. So I want to start off the conversation tonight by jumping back into my old body and sharing what depression used to look like for me. So that way we can get on the same page and that you can get an idea of how insidious that it can present without ever noticing it from the outside looking in. Like, I think a lot of my life, I spent people watching me being like, you don't have depression. You're not going through that. That's not what it looks like. And there was a lot of gaslighting into me trying to share my experience and people not understanding that it doesn't have to look like this cookie cutter thing. And just because it doesn't look like that thing, it doesn't mean that I don't need help. It doesn't mean that I don't deserve grace and patience. And I think that a lot of us have found ourselves in that boat because I talk to my niche is the high achieving perfectionist, right? We don't come off the same way as the general person who's been struggling with depression for 30 years and is clinically treatment resistant and has all the, tried every single medication and has absolutely nothing wrong with them. It's just a chemical imbalance. And maybe we will go there today. I don't know. But we just present a little bit differently. And I think that that is a huge barrier to care and also a huge barrier for support. And I am going to talk about a little bit of the ways that I felt. But I want to start off this section of the chat tonight by asking you, what do you expect depression to look like? Like, drop that in the chat. What are the features that would make you be like, that person has depression, and I can label it that way? Or it could be stuff about yourself where you're like, this is how I know that I have depression. I just want to hear what your experience has been like, and then we will talk about mine. And I will go into lots of detail for you. James is writing social withdrawal. Yes, that's a huge one. And I am going to be talking about that tonight in my own personal situations of what social withdrawal looks like for me. Jenny's writing lack of joy and numb to emotions, and I will definitely be hitting on that one. I will fill in some blanks here because I think when I sat down to brainstorm what does depression look like in my own head and what I would assume like a lay person would say about it, I think that people would describe it as like, this person is crying a lot and they're sleeping a lot and they're isolating a lot and they have flat affect, like they can't feel joy, they can't get happy. This person doesn't care about anything, they're just like murr. And I think that when we look at it that way, it is so oversimplified because we are complicated creatures. And we have a lot more going on emotionally and intellectually and physically that's happening in our bodies that presents differently. And like I said at the beginning, uniquely to each person based on what a depressive episode is for them, right? And I think that I can use myself as the example. Like I am such a colorful character of someone who can go up and someone who can have the pizzazz and have the enthusiasm, when at the same time inside I can feel absolutely dead, right? So there has to be a bigger talk that we're going to have about what symptoms look like and how they present in people's lives. And you guys are all writing in very accurate things in here. Ryan said a lack of engagement in life. Alicia's saying disinterest in things that typically excite you or bring you joy. There's that lack of motivation, the inability to focus. Like, yes, we are going to hit on all these things. So let's just dive into it, I guess, because that's what we're here to do. So I'm going to tell you about what my depressive episodes have looked like. The first one that I wrote on my list was anhedonia. Do you guys know what anhedonia is as a definition? I'm sure if you guys are in the mental health sphere, you've heard that word before. A lot of you are saying no already. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, anhedonia is the, let's call it the psychological term and definition for feeling that lack of pleasure in anything. And my anhedonia would show up as me asking like, what's the point? What is the point in doing this? I don't get that. I don't have the drive or the desire because it just feels pointless. And if that's something that you've experienced before, please feel free to write in the chat and be like, yes, that is me when I'm in a depressive episode. Like just this lack of wanting to engage in anything at all and the inability to feel pleasure. It's not even just the lack of joy for things that you used to like. It's like, even if someone would tell me a funny joke, I'd be like, huh. And like internally, I'd be like, that's funny, but like I wasn't able to physically process the funny that's supposed to move through the body. And is this lack of disconnection. So sorry, not the lack of disconnection, the lack of connection, which was disconnection. So that's always the first one that makes it onto my list for depression. Something else that I notice when I'm in a state of depression is feeling super irritable. And I think that this is one that a lot of people miss, where they're like, oh, anxiety, that's irritability because I'm so overwhelmed and I'm going to snap at people. And I'm like, no, for me, when I'm in a depressed state, I can way easier access anger, frustration, irritability, being impatient. So if that is something that happens to you too, I think that that's a good little sign for us to look at is, are we getting in more fights with people around us? Are we more defensive? Are we less agreeable in places that don't really matter? Like we're just trying to gain that sense of self or being more defensive or gaining control. And I think that a lot of us associate it, and I will repeat that again, with anxiety instead of depression. But I think that when you notice those mood changes, and noticing that you are impatient and easier to yell and easier to frustrate, like that can be a very big sign and signal. And it was always a huge one for me because my entire life I've been surrounded by interpersonal conflict. And I would notice that that trigger would be like the hairpin trigger was faster for me to get there when I was in a depressed state. So the next one that I put on my list was distracting myself with cheap entertainment. So I would notice that I'd be in my depressed states, I'm much more likely to hang out in the scroll hole, staying on Instagram for a lot longer, scrolling through TikTok, doing nothing except looking at dogs splooting, watching TV, binging on it, keeping Netflix going. The notification comes up and it's like, are you still watching this show? And you're like, fuck you. Unfortunately, yes, I still am. So I would catch myself in this state of looking for things to distract myself because the sensation that was happening inside my body was not just so overwhelming that I had to distract, but almost had that sensation of emptiness where I'm like, I need to fill this time with something that's not in my head. Like I need to feel something artificial. So that is something that I don't want you guys to forget about. And obviously I was trying to be creative when I was brainstorming about what my depressive episodes can look like. And I think because that's such an activity that we associate with being a human being these days that we don't recognize, where it's like, can I pull myself away from that thing? Can I exit the app and not go check it again and actually get out and go do something instead of getting sucked into the world of non-reality? So I think that we need to delineate that as maybe something to be looking out for as well. Lack of motivation, which you guys already brought up. That is a huge one for me. And I will talk about, I guess, a little bit more personally what happens to me when I'm in the worst state or what I'm in right now, which I'll get to later. But the lack of motivation to do anything is what it would look like at my worst. And I mean, like, even the lack of motivation to go get a cup of water. Which I think that you guys have all experienced. You're like, I could go thirsty tonight, or I could go fill my water. And you've like negotiated it 7 times in your head, and you're like, okay, I need to either go get the water or I need to be thirsty, but I need to pick right now instead of ruminating over this. That is sometimes what a depressive state would look like for me, is absolute decision paralysis because I have no motivation to do the things that I need to do. And that applies to like regular hygiene. I tell my peace of mind method group members all the time that I will notice that I'm slipping when I don't want to brush my teeth before I go to bed. I'm like, I'll get to it tomorrow. It's like, don't do that, dude. Get to it now. All you have to do is flick your wrist. Okay. And for me, it seems like such a daunting task. It's like, I've done all these high level things today, and now I simply can't brush my teeth, right? We get to that overwhelm and we're not capable of doing it. And that is that is definitely something that even hits my lack of motivation list, right? It's not just cleaning the kitchen and doing the laundry and folding it and making my bed and cooking and doing all the things, taking my dog on a walk and also showing up to my calls and doing work and doing shit like this. Like, it would be the low bar stuff that would be hitting me as that lack of motivation when I'm at my worst. And this is what we're going through right now, is like what my depression looks like when it's at its rock bottom. The next one that I dropped on here was procrastination. Okay, so it's not just the lack of motivation to do it. There's the motivation is there to want to do the thing so that you don't feel like a piece of shit. But the procrastination is the thing that makes you not capable of doing it. You're like, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe in an hour. And we keep playing with that game with ourselves, and it gives us a lot of ammunition for the self-bullying that usually comes along in a depressive state, which again, I will speak to later. And I saw that one of you guys popped it in the chat earlier that said the negative self-talk that happens in your brain. Brittany, I see the comment that you dropped in the chat, and I'm going to get to that later. Okay. I just want to paint the picture for what things have looked like at their worst for me, and maybe so that you guys can have a similar experience and feel that sense of like, I'm not alone here. And we're going to build to that. Okay. I'm going to give you all the answers that I could possibly give you while I'm with you tonight. Okay. So the next one is isolating myself, which you guys did put in the chat, but it's not from everyone. Okay. When I'm at my worst, I will isolate myself from the people who I feel like I have to perform for. And that even includes members of my family and partners that I've been with in my life, and even currently my husband. Like, when I am at my worst, I only want to be around people who I know that I can take off the mask for and that I don't have to do the monkey dance for. And I think that we can only be lucky in this life if we have someone like that or a few people like that who will accept us as we are. A lot of us don't. A lot of us don't feel like we have someone who's going to accept us as we are. So we end up self-isolating and running away from everyone and not talking to anyone and not answering those text messages. And that is something that is very common. But I did want to talk about my personal experience, which is I won't hide from everyone. I've never been in a depressive state where no one knew about it, because I've always had people that were willing to sit in the valleys with me and hold my hand through that, and still promise that they would love me through that, even though I was the ugliest version of myself, which I am super, super lucky for. But that is something that I recognize that I do. I will 100% socially isolate, and I will still try and push away those people when I really, really, really am at my worst, but I still will allow them in, because I know that it's not healthy for us to be doing things like that, right? I already brought up the not enough energy to do basic tasks, which I do not need to talk about again because, you know, we be nasty when we do stuff like that, and that's okay. We are allowed when we're in a depressive state to be our not cleanest, most loveliest self. And I've grown a lot of compassion for that because I recognize how much energy it takes just to have depression and to ruminate on those thoughts and to have those feelings existing in our body and our nervous system all the time. So sometimes I give myself a massive amount of grace for leaving the dishes in the sink if it must happen, or like I said, not brushing my teeth. And I'm like, I will get to that tomorrow. And I am not ashamed to say that. Like, I talk about this stuff with my patients all the time, because keeping it a secret and having shame about it is half of the problem. Like, we all need to shake hands and give like a truce and be like, listen, I know we all do it. It's okay. We are all going to get through this. Another thing that I notice when I'm at my worst is mental rigidity. And I think that a lot of people don't recognize that within themselves, because as your mental health is changing, your thoughts are changing with you, and you're not capable of having that self-awareness. But when I'm in that place, I don't have the same creativity to look at things differently. Like, I don't have the capacity and the space to process it differently, to think about it differently, to have a new perspective or a spontaneous idea, or allow myself the flexibility to be like, oh, let me integrate that information. Like, the way that I see it is the way that I see it, and I can't be wavered. So let's call it, I call it mental rigidity, but maybe you guys would associate it with being stubborn or being, you know, having that lack of self-awareness. It can happen when we're in that place. And it's because we have something called negative lens bias. And that is when we, because we're in the state that we're in, we're looking at the entire world that way. You guys would call, in a positive way, rose-colored glasses. Let's call these shady shit glasses. And that's what negative lens bias is we have this perception that because we feel bad, that everything is bad, or because we're feeling a certain way inside of ourselves, that that might be how we perceive a situation, when in reality, or in our best version of ourselves, it might not actually be that way at all, but we're not capable of seeing outside of it. And where I notice mental rigidity the most is when, not just with me when I'm in that place, but when I'm talking to other people who are in a depressive episode, that I'm like, all right, let's just make this small little change and let's see what happens when we do that. And they're not capable of making the change, right? And it's not because of the lack of motivation or the lack of skill or the procrastination or the anhedonia. It doesn't have to do with that. It's the mental rigidity of saying, I don't think that's going to work because I can't see that working. So I'm just not going to do it. And then we end up not capable of growth and change. So I think mental rigidity is the biggest one that keeps us stuck. And that's why I wanted it on my list for you guys, because on a baseline, and I'm going to swear, I've already sworn 100 times tonight, but I'm going to do it again because you're in a Dr. J chat, which means swearing is here. But I'm stubborn as fuck. And that's on a regular day. And then you put me into a depressive episode, and the reasoning with me is it's null and void. Like, someone's got to work really hard to allow me to see something differently, because it is a symptom of mine that I personally get. Now, the next one, which I think is super unique to me, but you guys can let me know if this is something you've experienced, but at my worst, I'm incapable of breaking my routine, and this can probably go back to mental rigidity, but I'm afraid to lose my rhythm. So even when I'm in a depressed state, I don't let my entire life go. I still do all of my shit and I still regulate my nervous system and I'm still doing my job and I'm still living my life and I'm still doing my chores and I'm still doing responsibilities, right? And I think that when I've noticed that I'm at my worst, that I am incapable of creating change. Like I remember a time where going on vacation was a threat to me because it was going to change my routine. And that's when I realized that I was in deep kakapupu because I was like, oh my God, someone wants to do something fun with me and I'm afraid to leave because I'm scared to like let go of this morsel of control because if I do, my depression is going to like swamp over me in the room and take over everything and I'm not going to be able to get it back. So that is something that I felt has been unique to me and is like a nice little warning sign for me. I don't know if you guys have that as well, but the inability to do anything spontaneous because you're in this state of like survival and fear of I can't do that. You don't really know why you can't do it, but you're like, I just fucking can't. And I think that that was a powerful realization for me. And Brittany's writing in the chat right now, I thought that was anxiety. And yeah, it can be, right? You could be so anxious that you don't want to have change. And that could be the reason why you're afraid to do something. There's a fear. Mine wasn't a fear of something happening in the future or out there. I mean, there was a component of it that was, but it was more about the rigidity of letting go of the present moment. Like I was so needing to like live in the past and live like in the present, but the past because that was the only way that was going to secure my future that I couldn't just let go and be a human being. I was just in full human doing mode as a full robot. Another big one that I think that we can all relate to is the dissociation, depersonalization, and derealization. And those ones have always been huge for me. Like I am a huge dissociator where I can actually be staring at a wall and be like, "Burp." Like I don't even know there's like worms in my brain. And it does come from that feeling of overwhelm where my body and my nervous system is just like womp womp and it shuts down. And that will then turn into the depersonalization and the derealization, which for me, and I guess for you guys, because you've had this experience, it just feels like you're going through the motions of life, but you're like, did this day even happen? Like, am I even here right now? Like, I don't know. Like, is this actually a real experience? Is this person actually talking to me right now? Like, I feel like I'm floating outside of my body. Like, the amount of times that I have been on a hike being like, get your shit together, get your shit together, get your shit together. And I'm like, I feel like I'm walking on water. Like, there is no human body here. I am just floating. And I think that that scares a lot of people. I actually spend a lot of my life in that zone, and I'm okay with that because I've gotten comfortable in that discomfort. And again, I will try and address some of that stuff later. But that is how it would show up for me. I felt like at my worst, probably in my biggest rock bottom, I felt like in a movie, you know, when it's like shit's happening and then it like rewinds and it's like just kidding, none of that shit ever happened. Like I had this thought in my head that my life was going to rewind and this was all going to be a fucking joke. And that this just it didn't actually exist and that it didn't have to matter. So that was the depersonalization is I'm not responsible for any of this shit. I'm just a pawn in the game. I'm just going to keep floating and let things happen. And then the derealization was like, this is not fucking real. So I just wanted to validate that experience if you're having it, because I know it scares a lot of people. And I'm here to make all the jokes about it, but also be so serious when I tell you I recognize how fucked up it is. So let's move on to the next one because someone already brought it up. I brought it up. Let's bring it up again. When I'm in a depressed state, that self-shame and the self-bullying is so loud in my head. Like, I don't even need anybody for that conversation. I'm like, you want to tear me down? Just get into my head. I could sit there and make my own life a living hell and not want to get off the hamster wheel because I actually believed not only the things that I was saying to myself, but that I also deserved it and that I needed those things to motivate me to move outside of that, which is the most fucked up, vicious cycle hamster wheel that you could possibly be on. So that is where I used to live, my hometown of self-shame and self-bullying, which would run on this weird fucking 24-hour clock like all day. It was like nasty, 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 nasty. You're a piece of shit. You can't do anything. You're worthless. Blah da da. And then the evening would roll around and it would be like, the day is almost done. You must now do everything in the history of time so that you don't feel like a piece of shit before you get into bed at night. And by the way, we're not going to let you sleep until you get all these things done. So my mind would just be like at night, but then during the day it would be like worms. And I hope that you guys all find that relatable because I used to say that like my sense of time when I'm in a depressive state would be so warped. I was like, I don't even know what's happening anymore. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'll speak more to that later, but let's keep going. So I'll say this one quick. I was like incapable of being social and making spontaneous conversation with other people at my worst. Like I'd rather be in a hole. My friends used to call me the hermit. I'd be hermiting. I'd be sitting in a dark room by myself, and I'm like, we don't need to talk. We just need to be together. So that is something that I definitely used to do in depressive episodes. And I would spend a lot of my time with my headphones on. Like I just didn't want to socialize. If I was in my room, my headphones were on. If I was in public, my headphones were on. If I was traveling somewhere, my headphones were on. Like I just, even if I wasn't listening to music, which I was definitely listening to angsty punk, okay? That is what it was. But I just didn't want to be talked to. And I think that it's like the self-isolation, but the social isolation of like, I don't even want that. Don't bring it over here because it's going to make me face myself in a way that I don't want it right now. So that is something that I wanted to add onto the list. And also, and this is something that I do really badly, and probably you guys do too, because like you're my people. But fantasizing about when times were better and trying to like make calculations of why they were better then versus where you are right now. And like, I think that that's like the high achieving perfectionist mode of our brain is like, I need to figure this all out. Like I need to do the math and understand how this happened and how I got here. And now I'm going to fantasize about how much everything was better before and how I let myself go and why I'm such a piece of shit. And yeah, I think that that is something that needs to be highlighted is we need to not be comparing back to better times and then blaming ourselves for the reasons that we end up here because sometimes it's in our control and sometimes it's not. And I will differentiate between those two little things. Not now, we'll get there. But yeah, we get stuck in our brains when we are in a depressed state of this rumination and this fantasizing because we're trying to escape, right? It's like we want to sit there and idolize about a time in our life where it was amazing instead of being like, well, this is shit now and I should probably navigate this better. But instead, I'm going to compare myself back to when things were the best and at the peak. And when you look back in time, it might have not even felt that way when you were there, but now like you're here and you're idolizing back to what it used to be. I just think that it's something that a lot of us do. We get stuck in this rumination pattern. And the last one on my list is I felt in every depressive episode that I've ever been in, like I'm the imposter and that I was experiencing it like it wasn't real. Like I'm like making it up. Like I was like trying to like sell the story where I'm like, I'm in a depressive episode. And in my head, I'd be like, you're fucking lying to yourself. And it was so confusing because I was like, am I here? Am I not? Do I deserve to be here? Should I not be here? Should I gaslight myself out of feeling this way? Are there other people in the world that should be feeling this? And I'm just being an asshole. I should be happy. Look at all the things I have. And I used to have this massive imposter syndrome, being like, this isn't actually depression. People have it way worse than you. You guys have done that, right? I feel like we've all done that. Where we're like, there is someone out there without water. And I'm sitting here being upset. I should be thankful. And you're like, that didn't get rid of my depression either. Okay, cool. Very good. Very good. But it is something that we all do. We have this imposter syndrome. Like we don't have a right to be depressed. Which is not true. And it's kind of screwed up when you think about it. So I have this analogy that I would describe when I was like in this state where I'm like, okay, it kind of felt like I was in a house, which is a weird, picture for me to paint for you. But like, I felt like I was in a house and I could just go into a room and I could close the door and no one would be able to see me. And then I'd like take a deep breath and be like, oh, I could take my mask off now. Like that's what I would describe my depression as in like a pictorial. And I don't know if you guys have ever thought about what your depression would look like. Maybe it's like the monster on the back and the shadows taking over. Or you're just like a puddle of mush and you're like, ah. Or if you're like the character from Inside Out and you're like sad. But for me, I felt like I was still navigating life and doing all this shit and holding all these rules. But then I would just like disappear into a room and I'd be like, nobody can see me, no one knows. I can hide here, everything is safe. So I just wanted you to get a good idea of how I envision. It's kind of like parts work in my brain of how I felt my depression before I even know what the heck parts work was. And yeah, so my fight or flight was, it was activated way easier. So like everything felt like a threat. Simple things like someone saying a comment or a minor disagreement or like a criticism, it would just like make me get my back up. And that's when all of this shit would sort of spiral because I am more of that emotional type of individual. And yeah, my core beliefs would come up a lot when I was in that state, like the voices in my head saying, you're unlovable, you're stupid, you're not good enough, you're a bad person, you're not worthy of people's efforts. Like that conversation in my head was so loud when I am at my worst. Like I'm not even going to talk about it like it's not here and it's never coming back. It potentially will and could. And I do hear the whispers of this sometimes, but they're just not as loud as they used to be when I was at my rock bottom. And I know that a lot of you are typing in the chat being like, yep, I relate. I relate to this so hard. And that's because I know I said it's not a universal experience, but there's gonna be parts of, some of us that are like, yeah, that fits for me and that doesn't fit for me. And that's why I'm here to give you like this overarching explanation. And just dive deeper into all this stuff. So yeah, the entire experience, let's be classic about it. It was like my cup was half empty instead of cup half full. And I think that we can all be like, yeah, that happens when we're in a depressive state. Like there's no seeing our way out of that. But something unique to me was I would always say to myself my whole life, I was like, you're never going to be happy. And you don't deserve to be happy for whatever reason that I believe. And I would blame it on myself. And then that was the reason that I'd never be happy because those are the cards that I was dealt. Like I would get this sense of like learned helplessness, like I wasn't in control. So hopefully right now, again, you're not feeling alone, right? And I want you to be able to relate to a lot of what I just said. I wasn't stuck in bed and incapable of lifting a finger. Like I still did shit and I felt like I was coasting through it and missing it. Like it felt like my life was just like water slipping out of my hands. Like everyone around me was just having this better experience and I was a life loser. Like that is how I would imagine it. Like I also didn't bring this up to people, like I told you guys earlier, because I didn't want them to hear how crazy I actually was or think that I was ungrateful for the life that I had. And I also didn't want someone, again, to be like, you don't have that. Like, I was so fucking sick of hearing that. It was irritating and it would get confusing again with my own gaslighting. So I was like, I need to stop sharing this with people. And that's what shut me up for so long. Like, I felt like an idiot. And I kept saying to myself in my head, just shut up. Just shut up. Just shut up. If you shut up, this isn't a thing. So just don't engage with it anymore. Get on with it, wrap it up. But inside I felt very lonely and disconnected and that I'd never be able to be happy like all the other puppets that were out there. I was like, why can't I live like you? Like, like Ariel. I was like, I want to be where the people are. And I just like couldn't be there. And I'm like fucking sitting there with my mermaid tail being like, Mah! And that was the experience that it was like for me having depression. And people were like, you look so pretty there on a rock being a mermaid. And I was like, yeah, no, I just want legs. What are your thoughts on that? So I hope you guys all understood that Disney reference. I definitely toss those into the mix here and there. So my depression would come and go, a few weeks or a few months here and there. And then it would feel like a veil lifted. and it'd feel different. And I was never able to put a finger on it. It wasn't seasonal and it didn't come at, a certain traumatic time. It just felt random. So I lived my life kind of waiting for it to lurk around the corner, and it made me very weary of it. And you guys might get that too. It's like when it used to hit me, I would get this oh no feeling, and then I'd freak out and I wouldn't be able to control it, and that would make it hit harder. And I didn't know how to observe it coming on without reacting to it. And that's why it became such a threat in my life. So, like I said, that's what it used to look like. And if I painted the picture well, it was not a good time. So I needed to get myself out of the cycle because I didn't ascribe to this belief that I was just a depressed human being for no reason. And like serotonin was in charge of all of it. Like I knew that there were so many things for me to learn, and numbing myself out with meds, it just wasn't on the table for me. And I will speak to that later because it might be for you. But like in my personal experience, I was like, there's more going on here. And I don't think this is a biochemical issue, even though sometimes it can feel like it. But when you really look and you really start to understand yourself well, you can see where it isn't. Okay. So I pulled myself out of rock bottom and this ugly cycle by doing this list of things that I'm going to share with you. So for those of you who've been waiting patiently, here it comes. And you might have done these things before and be like, okay, it doesn't work. But like, trust me when I say it's not working, because you're not extracting the right lessons out of the tools that you're learning. So it's not the tool's fault, it's user error. And that's not really your fault either, because no one's teaching you how to apply it to your depression. So let's go through my list of the things that pulled me out of depression. Are we ready? Give me a thumbs up if you're like, I'm still with you and we're here, because like I am so alone in this room. It's like echoing. Okay. I'm not going to go with numbers because I'm going to lose track of my numbers and then we're all going to be very confused. So the first one, I just said that and then said first. So mindfulness. Oh, would you like to see my cup again, James? Here it is. 40 ounces of goodness. Everyone always comments on my cup when they see it. But James is from Australia, so maybe he doesn't know about the Stanley yet. So the first one, mindfulness. Now, I'm not talking about the regular type of mindfulness that you guys learned, like you're like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 bullshit. Who knows that one? Comment in the chat if you're a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1er, or like whatever else you guys learn. You're like, the sky is blue, the tree is green, my feet are on the ground. It's like, okay, like I'm not talking about that type of mindfulness. Like, Brittany just wrote, taste the mint. Yeah, like, what does my saliva feel like? What does this shirt feel like around my neck? Like, just not that. I'm talking about the mindfulness where you're like labeling like the darker sort of stuff. Okay. And it's a lot harder than most people think. Like learning in mindfulness how to come back to a safe place in your mind that you're in control of. It's like this escapism from yourself when you're feeling so disconnected with the world. And it's really tough for people who have strong core beliefs, or maybe they've gone through stuff and they have CPTSD, because that sense of self, like coming back to that safety within yourself, it's fractured and it has to be worked on in a very deep way. And depression is filled, like I mentioned earlier, with tons of rumination and this could have, would have, should have. And you have to learn how to focus your mind and bring it back to the present. Okay. I always say that anxiety is a disease of looking forward, and depression is a disease of looking back. And mindfulness is the way we get into the present. And this is very, very simple, but you have to learn how to practice it consistently. Like, how do you create a safe base within yourself? You have to learn how to practice mindfulness. And sure, maybe that starts with you being like, the sky is blue and the grass is green and my feet are on the ground, but it's got to go deeper than that. Like, we have to learn how to have the self-awareness to say, oh, this is what's happening in my body right now. This is the emotion I'm having. This is the core belief that it's tied to. This is the experience that I'm having. This is the emotional flashback that's happening right now. This is the body language that I'm having right now. And that's what's escalating the situation. Like, we need to have a mindfulness that is so much deeper than being like, I'm sitting on a chair. Like it can't be that superficial. And I think that that's a way that mindfulness is sold to a lot of people. Okay. Now the next one is meditation. And you can go on my YouTube and you can watch all the lives I've done on meditation if you want a very big deep dive here. But I'm not talking about the guided stuff, like the stuff you're doing on YouTube where it's like, relax your mind, imagine a sunset, the gold ball is moving. Like, no, not that. Okay. I'm talking about the real sit with your shit and silence meditation, like to control and train your mind, but also be able to observe the inner workings of your mind. Like you need to be able to do that without spiraling, with neutral thought only. And that, again, needs to be practiced over and over and over again. Now, any person with depression who becomes a strong meditator is gonna learn to observe their thoughts and then think like, whoa, these are so fucked. I don't even know why I buy into this shit anymore. Okay. That's like a huge realization that comes along with a lot of my patients in Peace of Mind Method. It's like they've sat there enough that they're like, what bullshit are you trying to sell me? Like, I'm not on board with that. And that voice that's listening to the other voice is the one that we start tapping into. Like, that's what really helps us heal. It's the negotiator, it's the observer inside the brain. Instead of being run constantly by our narratives and our internal stories and our anxiety and our depression and our traumas, like we can't be run by that all the time. There has to be that voice of reason. And this is what meditation really, really, really gives. Okay. It's kind of like the gold standard of mental health lessons. Like, don't buy into what you're selling. You're a liar and you're being a little crazy right now. And think that's okay. We still love you. Okay. But this is a bit much, don't you think? And like, you need to have that conversation in your head. Like, I've had that chat with myself so many times, and I've talked myself down when I'm stuck inside that negative lens bias. And Chelsea, I know you just wrote in the chat, you sent it to just me, but I will out you to everyone. She just wrote, I had that moment this week, and Chelsea's one of my Peace of Mind Method patients. She's like, I had this moment this week and it was kind of cool, right? Like to be able to negotiate with yourself, to observe your emotions without judgment, it's so cool. And you can learn to train your brain to turn away from these thought patterns that keep repeating themselves purely by discipline. And this is why I always tell people, like, if you want to master your mind, if you want to heal your mental health, if you want to change your experience in your relationship with depression, especially, but anxiety too, you have to meditate. Like, there is no way past this because you are bound to learn so much stuff about yourself when you just sit for a little bit. And you're going to be like, huh, it doesn't actually have to be this way. This is just the way that I am behaving in that fight or flight mode, and I'm running on the hamster wheel and I'm afraid to get off of it. Okay. So, like I said, you can watch way more of my other meditation live replays. If you want them and you can't find them, just message me and say meditation. You can DM me on Instagram. I'll leave my handle here in the chat. For those of you that are listening to the replay, it's at dr.jenna.t. So you can message me there on Instagram, or you can message me on Facebook if we already have a chat going there. And you can find me in Real Life with Anxiety and Depression. If you don't know how to start a private message, just click my name and press message, okay? The next one is breath work. Now, I use breath work to get reconnected back into my body from that derealization, depersonalization, and dissociation. And it definitely has a stronger role with the nervous system and anxiety, but I would lean into breath work whenever I was feeling overwhelmed by an emotion that would spiral me into a pit. And I learned to create this space inside of my body and taught myself that not everything has to be an emotional tsunami that ends in devastation. Like that is really, yeah, breath work and me, like we go together, like, you know, I just, it had to become a part of the picture here, because it was not only regulating my nervous system on the daily and on the constant, but it became such a tool when I learned how to use it properly, not waiting for a panic attack to happen and then huffing and puffing like you're breathing into a paper bag and then being like, breath work doesn't work. It's like, no, it's not supposed to work that way. Okay. So doing it properly. And if you want a live replay on that, again, message me, say breath work. I will send it to you. I will teach you guys all the things if you must know. Okay. Which you're here. So like, I know you want to know. Now, the next one, sleep hygiene. Okay. For me, I used to like get into my bed midday when I was in a depressive state, and it was a suck hole. I even used to do the thing where like I would pass by my couch if I was going from like one task to the next, and I'd be like, I just need to lay down. It's like, no, you don't. You do not need to get sucked into the couch right now. You need to remain on your feet because we can't give into that desire to like do the nothing right now. So that was something I got more disciplined about, personally. No bed, unless it's for sleep and sex. Okay. I was not chilling in it. And I really tried not to chill on the couch midday either. Now, something else that I would do, okay? This is really personal to me. I don't know if you're gonna like it, but you probably will, because I'm gonna give you permission to be a little bit of a piece of shit in the morning, okay? I would give myself a reasonable amount of depression time in the morning. So I would wake up and I would give myself time where I didn't judge myself for moping and groaning and rolling around and complaining and sitting on my phone and scrolling and being like, I'm tired. I don't want to do this. Like, I would give myself 30 minutes to be like, this is your refractory period. Enjoy it. You want to groan, groan loudly. You want to complain, complain big. You want to feel bad, feel it really badly. And I would give myself time. And then when the timer was done, I'd be like, all right, it's up. Time to go. Time to go start your day. Instead of carrying that with me or trying to force it out of me or not giving it the space at all. Because we all need that time to be that complaining 7-year-old who didn't get the toy in the store to be like, meh, I'm not happy about this. And you're allowed. So I would give myself the time to do it. Okay. And then I would also make sure that I was going to bed at the same time every single night because I noticed that when I am depressed, my bedtime would keep creeping later and later because I couldn't turn off my rumination and I needed that extra time for winding down. So going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time too. Don't do that thing where you're like, I'm tired, I need to keep sleeping. It's like if you've slept 8 hours, get the fuck up. Okay. Set an alarm. Get yourself up at the same time every single day. Don't do this thing where you're like, I'm sleeping 9 hours today and now I'm gonna sleep 11 hours and I'm gonna stay in bed until 11 a.m. when I should have gone out at 8. It's like none of that. We need to have some discipline. We have to have some boundaries. And that's something that I would constantly reintegrate into my schedule because I'm like, girl, you're slipping. You're slipping and you're giving yourself way too much grace. We need to rein it back in on all that grace. You get 30 minutes of being a little bitch in the morning and then you get up and you go. Some people like to call it the 3-2-1, roll out of bed. Okay. I would have to amp myself up for that. I wouldn't just wake up and be like, wake up, work out. Like, that's not me. I am a very, very lazy, slow truck that goes in the morning. Okay. Like that for me is not a thing. I would need to prepare myself like a toddler who you say, we're leaving the house in 10 minutes. And you would tell them half an hour early. That's what I would do with myself. Because I'm like, you are not capable. You small 5'1" psycho running on a hamster wheel. You need to be told that you have half an hour when you only have 10 minutes. Okay. Like that's me. I need to be prepared, mentally prepared, like the little child that I am inside. Now, the next topic, food. Okay. Holy shit. It is so easy to let your food go when you're in the depressive mindset, right? Like you either have no appetite at all or you're like overeating comfort food in desperation of making yourself feel better. And like this is where it's really important to have a plan on how to eat. Like I'm someone who likes to keep eating super simple because food is a charged subject for me. So making sure that I was getting the right amount of protein and carbs and colors and fats and like especially hydration. Like you cannot forget about these things when you're in a depressed state. Like if you do not give your body and nervous system the nutrients that it needs, of course it's not going to have energy. Of course it's not going to have motivation. It's not going to want to move for you. Of course you're going to feel dizzy. Of course you're going to feel like a piece of shit. Of course you're going to have dissociation. Have you guys ever fasted for a day? There's never been a day that I fasted where I'm like, I am totally in my body right now. Like it makes you dissociate because you're like, this is so uncomfortable. I'm not even here right now. So we have to make sure we're getting the right nutrients inside of us. Okay. No, the next one. I love this one. It's yoga. Yoga changed my fucking life. That is the most cliche thing that I think I could have ever said. But what it did is it taught me how to be uncomfortable inside of my body and my mind and still be able to tolerate it. Okay. It showed me that I can come back to my breath or shift my focus in order to gain control while something uncomfortable is happening at the same time. And one of the most interesting lessons that it taught me is nothing is permanent. And I love that one. Like every sensation in your body, temporary. Even depression, it's temporary. And if I can have the right mindset and know that it's gonna come to a close, it doesn't have to be this never ending threat that takes away from my happiness. And I think that drilling those lessons in through my body and breathing it and believing it and feeling it over and over and over again, being like, I can do hard things. I can feel like my legs want to fall off right now. That's no different than not wanting to take my ass to go, do the task that I have to do right now. And if I can feel anger bubbling inside of me because I'm having a physical experience or an emotional experience to something in yoga, because whatever reason it decided to come up and wants to swallow me whole, but I can sit through that and be in the class and be present and hold my breath and also still listen and be there now. Why can't I do that in my life? Right? It was like this perfect training ground for everything that I ever needed to learn. And that's why I'm so obsessed with it. And that's why I teach it in a very specific way. Like in Peace of Mind Method, I tell people, we're not going to stand on our hands and our head. We're not going to get flexible. That's not the point. The point is to get so fucking uncomfortable and then learn how to navigate that and tolerate that so that we can apply that lesson when we step off of our yoga mat into our life. And we're like, this isn't as hard as it once felt because now I took myself to the mental gym and I know how to navigate that discomfort. So that's why I think that it's so cool. And it's like not a replicable thing compared to any other activity that we do. It's just so mind, body, soul, intellect, emotions, spiritual. It's like everything is like in one place. And I'm just absolutely enamored by it. And of course, we have to pay attention to other exercise too, right? Like when I'm in a depressed state, I don't want to work out. Like you guys don't want to work out either, right? Like you're tired and you're like, I don't have the resources for this right now. I'm going to listen to my body and stay in bed instead. Or I don't have the energy for this. I'm not going to push myself to do that. When you're in a depressive state, that is the opposite of what you should be doing. You should be like, my body's a liar. I need to have some boundaries and discipline, like I've been saying the entire time tonight. And I'm going to commit to the workout schedule that I've set for myself that is pretty much the same than when I'm in my normal state. So like, let's say for me, my regular state based on my own personal shit that I work through and my symptoms and my anxiety and my depression, I now only do 2 workouts, 20 minutes a week, or 2 workouts, 20 to 30 minutes per workout, okay, of a higher intensity style training. For me, I like to cycle, okay? That's all I do. I don't exceed that unless I have like a reason or a need to. Like, let's say I really need to process an emotion and I'm like, I have all this energy and it's gotta go. Like, if I have to, I must, but like, I usually don't deviate from the plan. It's 2 times a week because I don't want to throw myself into an anxiety state based on how much my nervous system is processing on a daily basis. Okay. If I'm in a depressed state, my body's going to want to do 0 of that exercise. I'm only going to want to walk and do yoga because like it doesn't take that much out of me. Right. But I'm going to say to myself, okay, either you commit to the 2 times a week and you, like I said to myself earlier, shut the fuck up, or I do 1 workout a week. It's like negotiation, right? I could do one. I could do 1 20-minute workout once a week, right? In order to get the blood pumping, in order to get my heart rate elevated, in order to make sure that I'm not getting stuck in that valley. It's like, okay, I still have to lift myself out, even if it's artificially, right? So we have to have the discipline to do that as well. And that's why I love following a plan. The next one on the list is nature. Duh, right? That's another thing that changed my life, which sounds so silly because it's like so free and accessible to all of us. But what nature allows us to do is connect to something that is bigger than ourselves, that's bigger than our depression, right? How depressed can you really be when you're like looking at a tree being like, how'd you grow, dude? Like it's nature has this way of just smacking you back into reality and being like, there's more than this, right? You can still be upset about that, but you can also still be here at the same time and appreciate the stuff that is in front of you. And I would describe it as mindfulness on steroids. Like there's just so much opportunity out there. Our bodies and our brains were designed for nature. It reduces our cortisol, it brings us peace. And like no one in the history of time has said like that they don't feel better when they look at a beautiful landscape or like sitting by a river or sitting by a lake or the ocean. So what I would do with myself is even if I didn't want to, when I was in that depressed state, I would drag myself out every single day. And I'd be like, okay, all you have to do is walk to the end of the driveway. All you have to do is, get into the car and drive where you need to. All you have to do is walk around the corner and get there. And by the time that my body was moving, I was like, I'm so happy to be here. I needed this so badly. And I'm so glad that all I started doing was moving my frickin' legs to get there, right? So we have to make that effort to have that thing that's bigger than us, because it does connect us to something more than getting stuck inside the noise and the shit inside of our heads, right? Like we're sitting there being like, rah, 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 and there's like a squirrel and his whole life purpose is to like bury that acorn. And you're like, fuck. Okay. I probably sound like such a tree hugger right now. And listen, I am, but I didn't always used to be that way, right? There's something about it that just brings you, it's like it expands your brain. Probably the mushrooms too, but that's a conversation for a different live replay. But yeah, me and nature, we make one. Now, the next one on my list is you have to learn your cognitive distortions. Do you guys know what those are? Can you just write in the chat if you know what your cognitive distortions are? Like if none of my Peace of Mind Method members answer this, because I know that you guys know them. So if you're not in my program, let me know if you know what your cognitive distortions are. I'd be super impressed. And the reason why I love them so much is because I needed in my depressive states and with my depression and how my mind works, like I needed something outside of myself to check myself before I wrecked myself. And these are honestly a really great start. Like, I think that it's tough to gain self-awareness to your own thoughts and your actions and your behaviors, and using external information that has no feelings. Like, cognitive distortions don't care about your feelings, and that's great. Like, they're just facts. That could be really helpful when you're trying to navigate your own feelings, because like it gets muddy up inside of your head. And that's why I love that there's labels that we can smack on stuff and be like, where is this happening right now? And there's been a lot of times in my life where I am buying into my own bullshit, like we all do. And in order to gatekeep my own spiral, I've asked myself, which one of your cognitive distortions is sucking the air out of the room right now? And where can you be more reasonable? Okay. So that's why I think that they're so powerful. And the fact that only one of you has commented in the chat that you know what your cognitive distortions are, like, do not snooze on this one. It can be very helpful to be inside of your mind with intelligence, with intellect, right? We don't want to just sift through there like we're emotional creatures being like, I just need someone to validate my feelings. It's like, no, sometimes we don't need that. Sometimes we need reason and neutrality and facts in order to balance everything so perfectly. Like, we want the emotions to be there, but we also want the logic and that self-awareness so that we can put ourselves on trial and be really good lawyers inside of our own heads. Yes, David, there's a difference between cognitive distortions and cognitive dissonance. I could probably do an entire live on cognitive dissonance, and I won't do that, but I'm saying cognitive distortions, okay? The next thing that I love from the cognitive behavioral therapy realm is understanding your core beliefs and where they came from. Knowing your core beliefs is powerful shit. Like, core beliefs guide everything when it comes to depression. If you're ever in an episode, I dare you to ask yourself, where am I feeling not good enough right now? Where am I feeling unworthy? Where am I feeling like a failure? Where am I feeling misunderstood? Where am I feeling lonely? Like, the answers will be right in front of you. And in my opinion, depressive episodes don't come out of nowhere. I actually don't care what any of you say. That's just not how it works. Like, something puts our nervous system into shutdown mode, and it's simply coping with the pain and the overwhelm that it's experiencing, and it's coming out as this type of symptom. Okay. So the faster that you can learn to come to terms with this concept, the faster you're going to be able to manage it and begin to heal the wounds that are causing these episodes in the first place. And obviously on my list, I put processing emotions, because like, you have to learn how to do that, because they take a toll on your nervous system and they get stored. Like, emotions get stored, and then they lead to that whole overwhelm and under processed and then shut down experience where we're now in that fight or flight state and incapable of getting out of it. So we have to learn how to navigate our emotions in a way that we're proud of. And that isn't just all mental, there has to be the physical component to it as well. And if you're interested in that sort of thing, you can DM me because I have a special mini course designed for you to learn more about that, which is the emotional processing mini course. And if you haven't heard about it, send me a note that says emotions, either to my Instagram or my Facebook, and I will send you that link because I think it was a very valuable mini course that we ran. If you just want to do things fast and furious and you're not really in this for the long haul, or you don't think that you can be. Now, last one on my list. Oh my God. Play. We have to play. As adults, we have to have fun. And like, I am huge on play. It's often the thing that goes the first for me in depression. And I do believe that it has to be scheduled in and treated as a non-negotiable. Like, you have to force yourself to find flow state. Even if you feel like you're pushing this massive boulder up the hill, you have to do it anyway. No excuses. Like, there are times where I don't want to, where I go and I'm like, that wasn't fun and I wanted it to be fun, but you have to learn not to judge that the thing that you're doing that's supposed to be fun isn't fun because you're not doing it for a result. You're not doing it to lift your depression. You're not doing it for a cure. You're doing it so that you can put that metaphorical, check in the box and say, I did that thing and I'm one step closer to reintegrating back with myself and who I am. And that was a good thing that I did. And I'm so proud of myself for doing that, right? Like, no one expects to eat one meal and lose weight, or, go to work one day and be rich. Like, none of that shit makes sense. So why do we apply this to our mental health? Like, we have to build and slowly create, and the results will come. And they might happen a year from now, or months from now, or years from now. Like, you have to plant that seed and allow it to frickin' grow. Okay. The name of the game for managing depression is intelligent scheduling. You cannot stop an episode from happening every time. Like, I sure as shit know that. But if you stick to that foolproof schedule that you create for yourself that works for your nervous system, you're going to be reducing the impact of when that depressive episode hits by like tenfold. And then if and when you do end up in an episode, which again, it's going to happen because we're not perfect, but these practices that I just gave you that list of, it's going to expedite the process. It's going to help you manage it easier. You're going to shift out of it faster. And you will heal it in time. Like, there is no depressive episode that's ever taken me out in the last bunches of years since I started working on this. Like, it shows up and I go, hey, and then it passes, right? There's the same emotional experience isn't happening. The same fear isn't happening. The threat's not there because I'm like, I have this shit under lock because I do this stuff, because I know how to approach it and tackle it when it's there. And I want you guys to have those tools as well. Like, I'm telling you, even when you learn these lessons over time, like, you're much more reasonable with yourself during the mental health blip. And like, one more thing, like, a huge change over the course of my life has been reducing the timing between feeling this way, like, oh, it's like coming on, it's happening again, and then taking action. Like, I've closed that window. And that can seem counterintuitive because you have no energy or motivation to do it. But I've gotten really good at blindly jumping and making things non-negotiable so that I can stop burning my energy on thinking about doing something and then failing because I didn't do it and then having a feel like a failure. And instead, I just use that energy to bring myself into a better place mentally and physically by doing the things, right? So all of those tools that I mentioned to you above, that's how I created Peace of Mind Method. And it's how I've dragged myself out of rock bottom bullshit on multiple occasions. Like, I am the tried and true example of someone who practices what she preaches. And I will lean on my method when I'm lost. And I have done it so many times because I know it's going to guide me back to the place of stability and safety, even when in the moment that feels impossible. So I'm going to tell you how my symptoms show up now because I feel like that is the biggest testament to all this work. And I'm going to be fully transparent with all of you. Like, I think I've been in a depressive episode since June, which is super odd timing for me. This is how I'm going to segue into telling you how it shows up now versus then before I use any of these tools. and change my relationship with anxiety and depression, but obviously depression because we're talking about that tonight. So this round, I've noticed it very quietly to the point where I've still asked myself, like, am I sure that this is what this is? Like, could this be something different? Like, I don't know, but it has been quiet and I've been fatigued and had a lack of motivation to work specifically. I know that none of my patients ever notice it, and that you guys see me show up every week for group call, and I show up to your appointments, and I don't reschedule shit, and I, post, and I'm out there, but like the lack of motivation is so real. Like there have been a lot of mind demons in my head, and it's been a lot to tackle with because it's difficult to show up for people as you're trying to teach them about this stuff while it's happening to you. It's like this weird inception mind fuck about my mental health all the time. And I knew that this was the work that I was stepping into, and I'm so here for the challenge, but I did want to, be authentic and say, working has been so hard for me. Reading, on the other hand, what a fucking breeze. I can read for hours a day because I'm escaping. There's a fantasy escapism component to it. But when it comes to my life and facing myself and doing the things that I have to do, I have been putting off stuff. I have put off vacuuming. I've put off cleaning. I have put off shopping for things. I've put off everything. But like work has been so tough. So like for those of you that still work when you're in a depressive episode, I know that you feel me. And it is hard. And like, we all deserve a clap for doing it. But most people don't recognize, like, I say this to people all the time. They're like, what do you mean? You look like you're working a lot. What are you talking about? And it's like, it is happening inside of my head, but I think that people don't realize that boulder that we're pushing up the hill when we're working. And still getting everything done and still being productive, and we're not slipping, but like we're like, it's so much harder. So yeah, kudos to all of us doing that. I have noticed this round that I've been a little bit emotionally distant and found myself dissociating a lot more. The elements of self-shame and self-bullying are still present, but they're more of a neutral conversation. Like it's not a yelling match in my head. It's more of like a, oh yeah, you're familiar with this. You know that. That's what this is connected to. That makes sense because of this. We're not going to let that get in the way of that. We're not going to let that bleed into that. And if it does, I can be like, I recognize that was happening. So yeah, more of a conversation, not a deterioration of myself. I have been a lot less inclined to move my body this round through, which I'm actively fighting against. Like I told you guys before, you have to have a schedule and you have to stick to it, or at least negotiate with yourself. And I've been feeling a bit purposeless and lost in the sauce, like kind of like I'm floating in space. Like, what's the point of all of this? And I do recognize that that's where I get, when I'm in that core belief, dissociation, derealization experience. So I'm not alarmed by it, but I just wanted to say like that is definitely what I'm experiencing right now. But most of the other elements that used to plague me, they aren't there. And that's a testament to the work that I put in on a consistent basis to never let my nervous system get to the point where it can't handle any more load and it has to do that shutdown thing. Okay. I just want to answer David's question really quick here. Does working on core shame help your depression? Oh, fuck yeah. Was that the answer you were looking for? Was it too enthusiastic? I didn't even mean to swear. It happened way too fast for my brain to process. Working on shame is probably at the core of everything that I do. And every conversation leads back to that peace of mind method, not within like the work that you're doing by yourself, but the work that you bring to me. Like every single group conversation, we are talking about internalized shame and how it plays a massive role in how we see the world and how we operate in it. And it's such a very, very powerful thing to learn. I want to give you guys in the next section more of like a task, okay? Because we're going to talk about the warning signs to regulate your nervous system, but I want to encourage you to make a list of the signs and signals that your body gives to you that suggests that you might want to do some cleanup work. So maybe you personally start to notice like, okay, my sleep pattern changes, my mood changes, my energy changes, I'm isolating from friends and family, my hygiene changes, my focus changes, whatever it is for you, I want you to make that list so that you know and go like, When I start to notice this, I need to pay more attention. I need to get on top of this. I need to do that. Instead of waiting for the depression monster to take over the entire room where you're like, well, how the fuck am I going to deal with this now? It's like, if you had that list of red flags for yourself, you'd be able to get on top of it faster. So that is homework that I'm leaving you with tonight. And I think that you can all do it, right? Like for me, that's when I, in myself, start to notice that I ramp up my treatment protocol into high gear. So I want you to have this list for yourself. If you don't want to help yourself, you most certainly don't have to, but I think that you're here because you do want to create change. So let's at least do a little bit of homework. Okay. And one more thing that I wanted to include in this section, because I didn't want to get censored about this through email and on Instagram either. But I did want to talk about the warning sign of like suicidal ideation. I think people freak about it a lot and they're like, oh my God, I'm having suicidal ideation, which means that I must be unsafe in my body. And now I'm gonna somehow, unalive myself, and I should be worried and I should commit myself to like a psych ward. And we all need to calm the fuck down when it comes to suicidal ideation. Okay. This is how I feel about it. I think that suicidal ideation is the cry out for help for overwhelm. I do not think that it puts you in a category of suicidal risk. I lived for years with suicidal ideation where I wanted to passively die all the time. And that didn't mean that I was ever going to do anything about it. I never had a plan. I never had an actual execution idea of how it would occur. I did not disconnect and dissociate from reality so hard that I was ready to go. It was just more of a, fuck, I'm so unbelievably overwhelmed and I'm in so much pain that this would just be easier if I wasn't here anymore, okay? And if this is something that happens inside of your head, this is a very normal experience and conversation for one to be having when they're in a state of depression, okay? Should you talk about it with someone? Sure. Come to me and let's talk the living shit out about this concept, because I will tell you over and over and over, you're not crazy, okay? You just need to navigate things better. And there is so much to be said about that because there is so much fear around this idea. And I really just think that it has to do with people not being secure within themselves. And we have to recognize that that's a very normal reaction to being in that state of just like, this sucks. I don't want this anymore. And if that's really how you feel, it's a lot easier and a lot of a faster road to work on yourself and heal and navigate this stuff with a professional and get better and actually do things and take steps than it is to go in the alternative direction. Like, it is so hard to detach yourself from reality until the point where you're okay with actually leaving it. Like, I don't think that there's many people over here to tell the tale on that one. And it is, I will repeat, so fucking hard. So it's a lot easier to choose your hard and just be like, I'm just going to work on it because you can. And when you have supportive people around you who are willing to help you and to laugh with you and to fist bump you and to raise you up and be like, let's just have a curious talk about these things, right? It starts to make your mental health healing journey so much better. And I will say this from the rooftops for the rest of my life. I am obsessed with my Peace of Mind Method community group calls because of this. We have the best chats. We have the best time with each other. There are people there to hold you up, to remind you that you are not alone. And it is just such a good fucking time. I don't even know why it's so good, but I'm obsessed with all the people in my program because we just have so much fun together talking about the shittiest stuff. Okay. And that is the kicker of all, is none of these conversations have to be too hard to have or too dark to have. Like, just have them, and then we have them and we step over them and we're like, cool, okay, on to the next, right? Like, we make it navigatable. Okay. Now I'm going to close off with two more very quick topics. Ooh, yeah, let's call it 2.5. Okay. I'm going to tell you the mindsets that have changed my relationship with depression. Okay. Some of these were like standard, then some of them were, I was like, I got to include this. And then some of them I think are funny. I don't remember what I put down here, but let's go through this. So the first one is, I'm stronger and I have the capability of tolerating discomfort. Yeah, we already talked about that with tools, okay? Number two, oh, I'm counting again. This is going to get messy. Okay, let's not screw this up, Jenna. It's not a monster that is going to come and steal my life away from me. Okay? I realized that it was a part of me and I had to learn how to integrate it, and that it wasn't this big, scary monster threat. It was like, okay, I need to learn how to dance with you. I need to not learn how to try and fight with you because clearly, like, I'm not ready to get bloody and like knock you out. We just have to learn how to dance together because, like, this whole life is a dance with our mental health. I really do think so. And you can't get rid of your dance partner, they're there for life. Number three, I am allowed to be down bad and not freak out about my productivity because there is a time for rest. And every single time I end up in a depressive episode these days, I will just be like, you know what? You deserve that. Take the 2 weeks. Be more chill about it. Don't overschedule yourself. Focus on that more, right? You take off the pressure because you don't have to be what you don't have to be. You are allowed to take your foot off the gas, and everything is not going to crumble if you do that. Okay. Number four, it will end. It does not last forever, and it will lift. Okay. Number five, circumstances can contribute to depression, but I, and hopefully you one day, have the tools to navigate them. Number six. Is this number six? Maybe it is. Sometimes shit just happens, and I'm doing the best that I can to keep my nervous system in a safe zone. Like, sometimes, guys, your life is just on fire. Bad shit happens, and it could throw you into a depressive episode, and that's allowed. Okay? You're not sick because of it. You're not a bad person because of it. It's just how your body processes overwhelm based on the patterns that it probably gained in childhood of needing to shut down based on the level of change that you're capable of making at the time. Okay? Number seven, two things can be true at the same time. I can be depressed and still have value. What a fucking thought, guys. We don't have to talk ourselves into a hole of shit and make ourselves feel so bad and that we're not good enough just because we're in a depressive state. You can actually still be just as productive or do as much or produce as much or be as good as you are or be there for someone else when you're in a depressive episode, okay? So you still have value. Number eight, I have the power to make 1% changes to create a better environment for my nervous system, body, and brain. I do not need to figure out the 100% yesterday, okay? Stop trying to tackle the entire world at the same time. Just one day, 1%. Or look at your day and say, okay, this is a shitty day. Like, I'm in the shithole. What can I do to make my day 10% better? If I can do that, that's a win. I don't need 100% better. I don't need perfection. I don't need everything to go my way. I don't need everything to be as optimized as possible. I don't even have to be happy. I just need 10% better. And if you take that mindset and you approach it to your entire life, you will freak out when you see how much you change. Okay? I don't even know what number I'm on anymore, so let's just call it number 9. Okay. If nothing changes, nothing changes. This is something I said years ago when I was like, I should patent this for the rest of time. You cannot change your life if you are not willing to take a step to change your life. So all you have to do is start doing, and something will change. And that will have a ricochet effect, and something else will change. And you'll gain a little bit more confidence, and something else will change. So you just have to start somewhere. So stop saying next week, next month, maybe when I'm in this place, maybe when I'm in this relationship, maybe when I feel like that. It's like, stop waiting. If nothing changes, nothing changes. And like, I could tell you this 150 times, the people who are wanting to change are going to be the ones who take the step to do that. So just take the step. Don't be one of those people that doesn't, because like, PU, stinky. Okay. Number 10, there is a difference. This is the one that made me laugh. Okay. There is a difference between sitting with your shit and sitting and rolling in your shit. Okay, guys? You need to learn how to sit with yourself, not go into your ugly and crazy and get stuck there and be like, this is who I am. I am darkness. I will never deserve happiness. Like, shut up. Okay? Stop rolling in your poo. Instead, let's learn how to sit with our shit and be like, okay, how can I change my mind about this? What can be different? Can I learn to accept that without judging it? Can that be step one? Can I learn how to change the narrative that I'm telling myself? Can I look for evidence that disproves what it is that I'm thinking over and over and convincing myself of? Like, you need to learn how to sit with it, not roll in it, okay? Number 11, 12. This is why I didn't want to count. Ugh, gross. I'm so annoyed with myself. My perfectionist brain is like, okay, patience is a fucking virtue. Okay? Stop racing to the finish line, especially when it comes to your mental health. Perfectionists, listen up. You need to be patient on this journey. You need to not do mental health work for 1 month and then be like, nothing's changing. Why isn't this working? It's like, stick with it for 6 months, 9 months. There is not one person who shows up to my group calls every single week in Peace of Mind Method that hasn't changed dramatically. And that change might have been at 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year and a half. I don't care when it happens. They're still learning shit, right? It's about continually showing up for yourself. You have to have patience. These things don't come to fruition. And I know that I already hammered home that lesson earlier about like, you don't get to go to the gym one day and be strong, or go to work one day and be rich, or, eat one healthy meal and be skinny. Like, you have to put in the effort consistently for a big period of time. Okay. And my last one is, you got to learn to ride the wave. The darkest parts of me make me who I am. Like, there is strength in that. And the valleys that we go through, like these depressive states, they're just as important as the peaks when we're up and lifted. And when it comes to that mental health journey and learning about yourself, you have to learn how to ride this wave. And that is the motto of my entire program. We have to learn how to ride the highs and ride the lows with grace, with ease, with skill, and without judgment. Okay? Now, one quick last little section, because some of you guys are interested in natural medicines. You guys know I'm a naturopathic doctor, and obviously I treat my patients with natural medicine. So we're going to do a quick little section, and then we're going to wrap it up, of the natural medicines that have helped me, and which ones I lean into and take for my depression. That doesn't mean that they work for everyone. It doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. It doesn't mean that you should take it. These are just ideas and options, and where the best research is sitting at. So this is in no particular order. I just scrambled and plopped them down. But the first one is curcumin, which is an anti-inflammatory. Sorry, I need to drink some water because this girl is living in the Sahara Desert right now. Curcumin is an anti-inflammatory, okay? They've done research on it that shows when let's call it the brain chemicals for inflammation are reduced, that depressive symptoms were showing up less, and also the scales were performing better for people reporting their own symptoms of depression, okay? There also is some theory to say that there could be an inflammatory nature to depression, so that is why it's something that I will suggest based on the patient that I have in front of me, and I have used it for myself in the past, both for full body inflammation and for depression. The next one on my list is saffron, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of because it's gained a lot of popularity in the last 3 years or so from the research that's come out. When I have taken saffron, I have taken it when my motivation has been at an all-time effing low. And I found that it did bring me back to this mindset of like, I can't do that. Like, I'm not going to put it off. I'm not going to procrastinate. I'm not going to avoid. I'm just going to do it because I can. And I find that saffron's a really cool one because it doesn't interact with medication in the same way that some of the other ones do. So it tends to be pretty safe. Okay. In the same vein as safe saffron is lavender. And lavender probably has the best, most comprehensive research for depression. There is going to be some on anxiety as well, but they've done some robust research on depression too. And lavender also does not interact with medications, except it does have a little bit of a hormonal component, which is why you're not supposed to give it to young males. But they did not see the same thing happen in adult males, so we don't have to worry about that. I know I'm going really heavy on the research super quick, but I feel like that's something important to know. And for those of you that have taken lavender, really the only side effect we're looking at is lavender burps. So if you don't like burping flowers, that can happen. And I'm just warning you because I know I have a patient in here on this live right now who has tried lavender and was like, Dr. J, what the fuck is up with these burps? And I was like, it's a thing. Okay. The next one on my list that I have tried for my depression has been rhodiola. This is an adaptogen. It is a plant that is used more for stress, but they have done research on it specifically for anxiety and depression, and it has performed well when compared to actual pharmaceuticals, which is super cool. Okay, so if that is something that would interest you, then I would look a little bit more into rhodiola, and you can always shoot me a message if you have any questions about that. And the next two on my list are ones that you cannot take with any sort of medication if you are on it. St. John's wort is the first one. It performs very, very well in the research, again, in comparison to pharmaceuticals for depression. It is not supposed to be used if you have anything except depression. So you have to be very careful with other diagnoses because it is going to technically change the neurochemical landscape of the brain. It is the gold standard when it comes to best performing natural medicines on the market. That being said, I think it's for a very particular type of patient, and there are some warnings that I would give and then not prescribe to specific patients. So this is not something I would ever tell you to go online and be like, yeah, play around with that one. Like, you should definitely seek out naturopathic or at least medical care if you are considering that, and make sure that it's not in any supplements that you guys are taking over the counter, because I have seen that too, of people buying like stuff on social media or through Amazon, and then there's like St. John's wort in it, and people are getting interesting experiences. So just make sure that you are not taking this unprescribed, please, please, please. And the next one on that list is 5-HTP. This is not something you should be taking with other medication, because it is going to put you at risk for a serotonin syndrome, which we do not want to have. For anyone who's ever had it, you cannot miss this. This is quite an uncomfortable experience, both inside the body and inside the mind. But that is not something you want to play around with. I think that 5-HTP can be helpful in some instances. I've seen it helpful for some patients, but it's not something that I tend to lean toward a lot, because it's more functional medicine in nature and less of the naturopathic holistic style of working through mental health conditions. But it's not bad. It's just, take at your own risk, and again, seek a medical professional in order to have this prescribed properly. The next one on my list was ashwagandha. I love ashwagandha. I have only had one patient in the history of time be allergic to this natural medicine, but it is super helpful, both with anxiety and depression and regulating cortisol. I have taken this every single time I've been in a depressive episode. My go-tos are more ashwagandha, saffron. I have dabbled with lavender and rhodiola. The other ones I tend to not lean into as much, just because they're more effective for me. But ashwagandha is like my baby, and I'm talking about in capsule form at the right dose, not in powders, not in teas, not in gummies. Guys, stop with this shit. We need to have professional lines of actual proper dosing when it comes to natural medicines, and what the expectation is that we have of them to change symptoms. And the other ones I've popped in here were fish oil, because there's been very good research on it just from a brain inflammation perspective, if we are ascribing to that theory. And then there is a supplement called SAMe, which is naturally made inside of the body. Again, we got to be careful with that one based on like your own personal genetics and what we're throwing into your body and what conditions you have, but it is still on the table and has performed, I would say, mild to moderately well when it comes to depressive symptoms. And the last disclaimer I will give to you. Oh, wait, let me answer some of these natural medicine questions super, super quick. Andrea's asking, what do you take? How do you intake saffron? Capsule. I always capsule everything, just based on therapeutic value that we're getting from it. And Brian, KSM 66 is the patented version of ashwagandha. So it is definitely a safe version that's going to have a good level of withanolides, which is the bioactive ingredient in it. But it doesn't have to be KSM 66, because that's just the patented version. So a company paid for that. That's not the only version of good ashwagandha out there, but it's definitely going to tell you that there's consistency to the product. Okay. Can ashwagandha be taken with other anxiety and depression meds? Yes, ashwagandha is quite safe when it comes to the profile of taking it with other medicines. Obviously, again, I'm going to suggest that you reach out either to a naturopathic doctor. If you want to drop me a note, you can always do that too. But you got to know exactly what medication we're talking about. But for the most part, it's generally safe. And I've had patients on medication take it because it is still providing cortisol regulation that the pharmaceuticals do not, right? Pharmaceuticals are controlling neurotransmitters, not hormones, okay? Never forget that. The last note that I will leave you on is with the role of medication in this entire process. I have no opinions. I have no judgments. Take it if you need it. There's nothing wrong with using it. It's just a tool, just like any other natural medicine, just like anything else. Like if you had high blood pressure or if you had a headache and you took an Advil, like there's a time and a place for everything, right? So I don't want you guys thinking that there is anything wrong with you for being on medication, that you can't work on yourself while you're on medication. In fact, that is when you should be working on yourself, is when you are regulated enough to do so. Medication is not a panacea, which is, that means the entire answer for mental health. We need to be using those things to de-intensify our symptoms so that we can put our mindset in the right space to then do all of the deeper work that I talked about tonight. Okay. So hopefully I answered all of your potential questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas on depression tonight. I am going to drop a link in the chat right now for anyone who does want to book a call with me. If you want to talk to me about what's going on, if you want to learn how to navigate your mental health differently, if you are one of my people who is ready to change your relationship with anxiety and depression, but again, especially the depression, like if you want to work on these things, then I want to work with you because I know you're going to do it. Okay, so pop up my calendar there if you want to book a call with me. I will be available at a few hours here and there for the next few days. If you can't find a time in my calendar that works for you, drop me a note. I will find a time to get that to you. And yes, as a reminder, this will be recorded and for replay. So if you guys want to watch it again, if you want to send it to someone who you think it might be helpful for, and I will be sending this out tomorrow for Wisdom Wednesday. So thanks for joining me live. If any questions come up that pop into your brain later when you're sitting in bed at night and you're like, shit, should have asked that live. Again, shoot me a message. I answer all of you guys. I try and stay super diligent on my inbox so that I can connect with as many of you as I can. So thanks for joining me. I hope that all of this was helpful for you. And thanks for sticking it out with me and listening to my stories and holding space for me this evening while I shared something that I thought was going to be very difficult for me to talk about, but you guys made it very smooth and easy. Okay. I will see you around soon and keep your eyes out for the next live event that I'm going to be running. All right, guys. Good night.